and most compelling story.
Enter us!
Turn up the volume!
Welcome, Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. Joining me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City and beyond. She's Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
You know.
You're here.
I'm here.
It's important to be here.
It is important to be here for ourselves and for others, especially in times like these.
Yes.
How about you?
I am glad to be here with you, and I'm really glad to be here continuing the show. It's not as if we wouldn't continue the show. But if folks are wondering, and we do have international listeners who may or may not be plugged into what's happening in politics in the U.S. We just had a very interesting election with some results that, I'll just say a lot of folks were disappointed in. Let me just say a couple things if I can take some space on this.
Please.
This is a show about mental health awareness and providing mental health education. We have been told at times to stay out of politics and kind of stay in our lane. And I just want to say two things about that. One is that, let me just start personally. As a woman of color, it is nearly impossible for me to stay unpoliticized.
Yeah.
I live in a body that is colonized and politicized historically. I manage and navigate my world through the lens of this body. And historically, it is the politics of my existence that might dictate what happens to my body, what I can do with my body, and what my civil liberties are.
Yeah.
I will say that I've been incredibly privileged to receive an education, to have this platform, to be able to share what I know about a particular area of work, psychological science. And it's my responsibility in stewardship of this work to be as accurate and discerning and careful and I believe, I said this word twice, but like responsible for this discipline. And we just talked about in the last episode how psychology has not been a perfect, immaculate, liberating science.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of periods of very disheartening things for us to get here in that field. But that's, so I combined the personal and the professional, but what I want to say is that this work is embedded in understanding and studying and then contributing to the welfare of people's livelihoods. And by livelihood, I mean their mental health. Mm-hmm. And so the different ways in which this field contributes to that will, matter depending on where people are at with their professional responsibility. And with this show, mine is around education, awareness, and a little bit of levity and entertainment, because we do it through storytelling. Yeah. And so I just wanted to say that, I hope people continue to stay with us and continue to be curious about the work that we're doing on this show. And if anything, right now and in the near future, there will be a lot of human suffering. And so mental health work and the mental health field will be so critical in how we stay well, how we stay focused, how we stay on the line, as we say. And if anyone is feeling incredibly exhausted, a lot of people feel exhausted, but if anyone is feeling at a point where they are giving up, they are feeling like, a bit of disillusionment, a lot of disappointment, a sense of what's next, I encourage you to take care of your mental health. And our job is to talk about how we can do that and how people can stay centered and uplifted and not be lost to this hate, not be lost to this feeling of thwarted belongingness, not be lost to the sense that one can do little to improve their lives. And the last thing I want to say is, certainly if you've listened to our show before, we really do better as a collective. So it's important for me that other people are liberated and free, not just myself, but others. It's important for me that people have the level of emotional wellness to be a part of our community. And again, as I said, not be lost to mental health and not be lost to despair and the threats to despair. If you've listened to any of our X-Men shows, it's probably clear that we care about not just individual mental health, but this sense of like the community. If you do not know about the importance of your community being well and thriving and flourishing and how that impacts your own mental health, you ain't listening to this show. Like, come back and listen. Don't go anywhere. Come back and listen.
You're hearing it, but you're not listening to it.
Yeah.
And by the way, when we say community, we're not just talking about our neighborhood. We're not just talking about our state. We're not just talking about the nation of the United States of America. We are talking globally. We are a community globally. No matter what you think about borders, no matter what you think about, I love my state more than I love my country, or my state is more important to me than this, or states' rights or whatever. You're missing the bigger picture. We're all human beings, and we all need to work together and to be together.
And we've got to get rid of this zero-sum mentality that if other people get something, I get less. That's just not how it works from the framing of, as I said, psychology and mental health. We actually know that's not the case.
Yeah.
And we've got to really dismantle that narrative. So I just wanted to say that, I welcome people to take this time. It's just a few days after the election here in the U.S. as we're recording this. And this is a time of grief for a lot of people. This is a time of self-care. Please do what you can. If listening to the show today is in any way uplifting to you, lighthearted, even just a little bit of, adding some hopefulness to your day, then we've done our jobs.
Yeah. All right. Well, beautifully said. I don't think I can really add anything to that conversation. I'm right there with you and agree with you. And I hope our listeners understand where we're coming from as well and continue to move forward with us. With all of that said, let's talk about a woman looking for a man.
Oh,
the right man. This episode, the fourth episode of Harley Quinn, which can be found over on Max, is called Finding Mr. Right. But you're not looking for a romantic partner. Harley, now that she has put together her team, is looking for the right arch nemesis. Will she find it? She's got high aspirations. So this can't just be anyone. It can't be any schmuck on the street, which is offered up to her as a possibility. Part-time heroes looking for part-time nemesis, available to fight on the weekends. That's not good enough. She needs to raise to a level of importance that gives her someone like the Dark Knight himself, Batman, as her arch nemesis. She's basically trying to poach Batman from the Joker.
She's a high achiever, and we're seeing all of the qualities of a high achiever here, which is, and these could be most of the time these are good qualities, but sometimes, look, I'm a high achiever myself.
Explain that, though, because I think the term itself is not necessarily self-explanatory, if that makes sense. To be a high achiever, do you actually have to achieve? Or are you highly aspirational? Because right now, no one believes that she can achieve the level of fame or infamy to reach someone like a Batman. So would you say that she's a high achiever or that she has just lofty ambitions at this point?
I'm glad that you're making this distinction, because a high achiever tends to have experiences marked by success across some aspects of their life. In the last couple episodes, we've been talking about Harley Quinn and her career. Now we're using the framework of the Batman villain society, the structures and systems that rule and dictate some of what goes on socially with this this group of people. But we're kind of looking at, for Harley, like her career ascension, her career development, because she's said that this is how she sees herself, and this is how she basically wants to self-actualize.
Yeah.
She hasn't yet talked about achieving things in other parts of her personhood. Like, she hasn't really talked about mental health growth. She hasn't talked about social growth. She hasn't talked about other personal things. A lot of her focus has been on her career.
And specifically, she is laser focused on beating the Joker at his own game.
Yes.
So it's not even that she wants necessarily to reach the upper echelon of supervillains in Gotham City, so much as she just simply wants to see her old love / boss destroyed. She just wants to see him fail more, or she wants to do better than he, more than anything else.
I would agree with that. I also feel as though she's kind of been groomed into believing that to be accomplished, to be valued, to be a somebody is to be successful in the ranks of the Gotham City villains. So yes, she wants to undermine the Joker, but I also feel like, what other world does she know? She thinks that this is how to become a person. And so it's kind of, it's entangled, and that's okay. But I totally agree with you. This has some motives here about trying to best him at his own game. What's interesting, so your question about high achiever, yes, there has to be some experiences where that person values their hard work and connects their hard work to their achievements. And it's all perspective, it's all subjective. Those achievements are kind of framed within how that person determines and defines those achievements.
And by the way, while this has been a comedy and it has been seen as her sort of being bumbling, or her crew is bumbling, we cannot forget that the last 3 episodes have in fact shown a certain degree of success for Harley. She is rising within the ranks. So I don't mean to say that she is a failure or that she's not adequately succeeded to reach this level of infamy within the Gotham City rogue community. However, she doesn't have the name recognition as of the Joker yet. Right. Sure. So she is on her way up, and she is being offered options that will help her take a step forward in that career choice. But she's not happy with them. We should say that the crew is still together. It's Harley. It's Poison Ivy adjacent. She's the resident of their headquarters. She is the person who rents out that apartment, but she's not officially part of the team.
She's kind of a reluctant
She's
NPC.
the Batman to the Justice League.
Sure. There's a sense of not bitterness, but wisdom there. Like, don't be impulsive, always have extra plans, have plan B, C through Z.
And
be a little bit more discerning.
Yeah, a great answer has been given to us in this episode too. We were talking about, does Poison Ivy see herself as a supervillain? Because of the glass ceiling from the last episode, does Poison Ivy see herself as someone who could break that glass ceiling? And in this particular episode, she is called a supervillain at one point, and she corrects the media and says, I actually prefer to call myself an eco-terrorist. Yeah. So she does not consider herself a villain per se. She simply sees herself as someone with a mission, and she is trying to do everything she can to protect the ecosystem, the environment, from humanity.
Poison Ivy definitely sees the blurriness between good and bad, and probably is more, or I'll say, seems to be as critical of supervillains as maybe our heroes do. She's kind of an anti-hero right now.
Yeah.
And she has been a mentor to Harley Quinn, giving her some sage advice, asking her to regulate herself a little bit. Don't be so impulsive. Don't be so loud. Don't be so aggressive. Use your skills and strategies in much more effective ways. And she's even at one point told Harley Quinn, do you even want this?
Right.
What are you really getting out of this?
Right.
But to point to high achievers and the high achiever identity, let me speak to my high achieving peeps out there who wonder about this. It is it's a treacherous journey, because the high achieving lifestyle is one that often there's perfectionism around this. You feel as though no job or project or action or behavior can be anything less than absolutely perfect. So,
and more often than not, even when it's done, you will not think it ever achieved perfection.
Right.
You are going to find flaws in it the more you look back at it.
Yes. So there's a sense of
So what you're saying is
self-doubt.
overachievers are never happy.
Not
with their work.
necessarily, but the happiness is fleeting, because the high achiever will always notice something that might be even better or could have been a more successful outcome. There's a cognitive distortion around this. It's called like all or nothing thinking, where it's like, well, I won't even do a thing unless it's absolutely perfect, unless I can put 110% into it and ensure that it's the best. And the problem with the idea of the best is that there's so many other factors involved with an individual human being around what's the best. We've talked about this with Batman. He thinks he's doing the best that he can, and it depends on the factors and the resources that he has around him. But yeah, there's a lot of almost a miscalculation of things like how one can achieve something, how much time you need to achieve that thing. There's the concept of time blindness, this idea that for some of us, we think we can accomplish a goal within a certain period of time, and then we fall flat, or we fall short on that. And it's because our relationship with time is really distorted.
Is that also married to the perfection angle? So in other words, everything you're describing right now tells me that I am not a high achiever. Because I'm happy with what's just good enough to get by. But that means I can meet a deadline, whereas someone who demands perfection might not meet that deadline. They may underestimate the amount of time necessary to get that done because they're underestimating their own level of perfectionism.
And a lot of times,
by the way, that's not true. I'm kidding, by the way, about the...
A lot of times with high achievers, they actually will finish on time. And this is kind of the intersection of a procrastinator and a high achiever, where the procrastination is very anxiety driven. So this is, again, we're really going into the depths of cognitive functioning here. And yes, if folks who are or who have ADHD or feel that this is also about a neurodivergent brain working, it's very similar and can be related to that, where you have the self-fulfilling prophecy that if something is delayed until the last minute and you do well on it, you have this idea that your best work comes from pressure. Your best work comes from the 11th hour of struggling through the painstaking, rushed ideation that you're doing in those last moments. And then you do fairly well on it, which fulfills that concept. See, I should wait until, or it doesn't, it's not detrimental to wait till the last minute because I end up doing well anyway. Mm-hmm. That's not true for everybody, but that can lead to some additional distortions around things like procrastination, waiting till the last minute, putting things together on the 11th hour and still doing okay.
Right.
You don't have the data to show that maybe if you did start early and you chunked it out, worked on it over a period of time, that you probably could have done better or just the same with that. So I'm on a little bit of a tangent, but Harley Quinn seems to show some aspects of a high achieving personality, which is to strive for the very best, to try to calculate how to get there and not put enough mindfulness and thought and thoughtfulness really into her own well-being in this journey, just trying to survive in Gotham City.
Right. Who else is still part of the crew? We've still got Clayface. We've still got Dr. Psycho. And Clayface brings in the expertise of one King Shark, who makes it known later that he is not a giant shark. He is just a regular sized shark that appears to be giant compared to a human being, which I thought was a great joke. Played by Ron Funches. If you know his comedy, you know exactly what kind of character we're dealing with. But it turns out that King Shark is a bit of a computer expert-ish, probably for the money. He is about as good as they're going to get. Clayface makes the joke that that King Shark helped raise him from a social media follower count of 8 to 18. So how good King Shark actually is, we do not know. We do know, however, that he is able to use the computer and get them onto websites that can go looking for their arch nemesis, not unlike a dating profile website. They start swiping to determine who would be a good fit. Harley makes it clear that she really only wants the best. And the best in Gotham City is going to be Batman. So she steals the Batmobile. How? We don't know. Doesn't matter. She steals the Batmobile because she knows that this plan will work. Batman does engage with her via the monitor inside the Batmobile, telling her that she's going to have to go to Arkham. Now, Drea, this is something that I think, again, we need to discuss, because the more and more material out there that comes out within Gotham City and the Batman universe, the more and more it's insistent that any of these villains need to go to Arkham, which, as we know, is an asylum for the criminally insane, as opposed to simply going to Blackgate, which is a more typical prison. But when you think I'm going to steal a car, regardless of what kind of car it is, even if it's a highly weaponized stealth vehicle used by a vigilante in Gotham City, I would not think Grand Theft Auto would apply to, I'm going to send you to Arkham.
Right. No, absolutely not. Stealing a car in and of itself as a crime should not land you in Arkham. Well, one thing is that I think Batman is using a threat here that he knows can kind of trigger Harley.
Sure.
Arkham...
Because Poison Ivy makes it clear earlier in the episode that every single time she's ever gone up against Batman,
Yes.
she's always ended up in Arkham.
Yes. So there's this idea that Arkham... I mean, any kind of incarceration is a bad situation for Harley, but that one in particular is a place where she has a lot of traumatic memories, a lot of history there that he knows about, or at least he knows generally about. So I think that's a little bit of like a kind of threat that he uses to try to get her to stop.
Yeah.
The other thing too is that Harley has she has a record. So it could very well be that the circumstances under which she stole that car could be taken into account with her sentencing. And that may be Arkham. Look at her psychological profile. Look at her inability to interact with and transition into, quote, normal society. She should be placed back in Arkham, where she will get some kind of restorative, therapeutic treatment along with serving her time. It makes sense to me why he would threaten that.
But judging by what you've seen from Harley right now, if she showed up at Arkham and therapists and doctors were trying to negotiate from her a reason why she did all of this stuff, nothing she would say, if she were truthful, would be quote unquote insane. She has a reasonable reason for wanting to steal the Batmobile. She has an end game. All of this implies to some sort of higher plan, and the higher the plan, the less likely she is to be insane, regardless of her past history.
Right. I would even just say plainly and simply, she knew right from wrong when
Correct.
she committed this crime. Because
Yeah.
we're using the legal definition of
Correct.
insane here.
Correct.
She knew that in fact,
But as we've discussed-
this is why she stole the Batmobile. She wanted
Yes.
to catch the attention of Batman by doing something illegal and destructive.
Correct.
And how more destructive can you be than not only stealing the Batmobile, but causing havoc, injuring other people, potentially threatening the lives of. I mean, she sets off bombs and buildings go down, and it could have been very, very dangerous.
And let us be clear. These are not bombs she had on her. These are all items used in the Batmobile, which again leads to the point that Batman is just full of devices that should not be seen or should not be used by other people.
Defensive weapons.
Those rockets were real defensive that brought down that building that was in progress of being built. But as we've said in the past, I'm sure if you go back to some of our earlier episodes of the podcast where we were dealing with Batman the Animated Series, I'm sure we differentiated between what would constitute imprisonment in Blackgate versus imprisonment in a sanitarium, which,
Sure.
We have discussed. Very few of even the rogues appear to need a psychiatric institution, a psychiatric prison per se. None of them would fall under the requirements for an insanity plea. They all have grandiose plans. They would all probably realistically go to Blackgate. It's just that Blackgate apparently doesn't have cells equipped for these, the Gotham's rogues. That being said, also, it's just not sexy enough to put them in prison. You got to put them into a mental prison.
Right.
Which I believe you've said really don't exist so much.
They do, yes. So historically, you're using the word sanitarium. Historically, those have been shut down.
Yeah.
The ones that are, much more restrained and limit people's access to appropriate and ethical treatments. There's another area in the history of psychology that deserves to be examined, and we deserve to learn from that. But there are psych wards.
Yeah.
There are clinics and sections of hospitals where it is on lockdown. If you're, if you're placed there on an involuntary hold, rather, you are essentially legally being held there by a mandatory act.
Yeah.
And this exists differently in different states, and it exists here in the state of California where we live. And it is for the benefit of the patient to be placed in a setting where they can receive treatments so they can stabilize. Now, if they've committed a crime and need to go into a similar situation, but have to have further containment, be further restricted, there are places where you can go legally to be essentially under watch. So those are two different settings that still exist where we have ethical practices and standards to take the very best care of those people while they're, for instance, awaiting a trial or serving a sentence. So these are typically wings or wards within a bigger system that can afford them that level of care and monitoring.
So realistically, Arkham Asylum should be a wing of Blackgate Prison.
For sure. Yeah.
That makes more sense to me than anything else. The Batmobile is stolen. She expects Batman to come retrieve it. Batman does not. Instead, it's young Damian as Robin, which really upsets her because A, Batman's lackey has now unofficially become her arch nemesis.
It's not good for PR for a number of reasons.
Yeah, and he's a child. He's a child. So to use her mallet or any other weapon against this young boy, it would not be perceived well in the press. And frankly, he just doesn't reach the level of nemesis that Harley herself wants. She doesn't want what would be a henchman on her side of the law being her arch nemesis. And so she's very upset, and time after time, Damian keeps stepping in. At one point, Harley even says, well, I'm going to go above Batman's head, and I'm actually just going to go to Metropolis, and I'm going to take Lois Lane hostage, knowing that Superman will now become my arch nemesis.
These aren't bad ideas.
They're not bad. They are grandiose plans. She's reasoned it out, but it's not working out for her. Superman comes crashing through the wall, finds it to be cute and endearing, never once acts as if Lois is in jeopardy in any way. And then because his dance card is filled up, presumably with Lex Luthor and with all kinds of various alien races coming to the Earth to destroy it, he passes it off to someone else who crashes through the wall. And again, it's little Damian. Mm-hmm. That then leads to Damian receiving more and more press, and the press basically solidifying him as her arch nemesis, regardless of whether that's what she wants. Harley decides to set the record straight. She tricks, we don't even really know how she gets him. We only know that in some way, shape, or form, she is able to get Damian into a burlap bag. She brings him to a location, a warehouse type location. She strings him up above a gigantic tank of water, which we've seen countless times, oftentimes run by Joker. So this is a plan.
Am I misremembering this? Because I feel like this is exactly what the Joker did.
He did
to Harley in order to entice Batman to come. And there's a shark in the tank. It
was the acid. There were the two acid baths.
Well, no, not in this series, but in the original series.
There was an original series. I don't remember if it was Harley hanging from. She may have been, but we did see this exact same thing where Batman was above a tank with shark.
You're right.
With a shark, and then he ends up exploding the tank, and everything comes flooding out.
That's right.
So this is a plan we've seen before, and so Harley straps Damian by his ankles above this tank, puts King Shark inside the water. King Shark says that he doesn't want to attack anybody. He's not very good with blood. He's not that kind of shark. And we all assumed that what that means is he passes out at the sight of blood or just doesn't do well with it. Turns out it actually creates a monster because a nervous, anxious symptom of Damian's is that he gets nosebleeds. Mm-hmm. And a droplet of blood hits the water and King Shark loses his mind, just becomes a different creature altogether. Cannot wait to eat Damian. Harley actually ends up saving Damian. And it's during all of this that it's revealed by Damian's own admission that no one in Gotham will believe her. They all think that he is Gotham's baby boy, the little apple pie, or whatever. And this is then revealed that this whole thing was a setup so that the local sort of Oprah-esque type talk show, Tawny, will uncover the truth. And now all of Gotham knows little Damian Wayne, little Robin, not the sweet kid everyone thought he was. And definitively, he is no longer Harley's nemesis. And in fact, never was. That they had all been duped by this kid. Batman comes in and has an intense battle with Harley. Poison Ivy joins in. The rest of the rogues join in. And now it looks like it's possible that Harley has successfully poached Batman from being the nemesis to the Joker, which really upsets the Joker. I in my book, she's winning. Yeah. Regardless of how it's all going down, she is getting what she desired, right?
Yeah. Yeah. He steps in to help Damian and essentially has to fight Harley. And she's quite good at standing up to him and, combating him eye to eye.
Equally acrobatic. She's not as strong, but she's got various wiles. She's got weapons that could do things to him. Poison Ivy certainly has the ability to restrain him even temporarily with her plants. As a team, Harley and her group are not doing badly against Gotham's number one hero. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, Superman and Lois are enjoying sushi out in Metropolis, watching this all go down on the news, which just goes along with my whole thing. And we've talked about this before. I hate the idea in a realistic environment, not so much in this comedy version of Gotham, but in a realistic Gotham. I hate the idea that Superman lives in the same universe as Batman, because if that's true, then Superman is allowing Gotham to be a cesspool simply because he has some unearned loyalty to a vigilante that's not doing very well at maintaining or cleaning up the city. He might be maintaining it, but it's not getting any better. And if Superman just stepped in, he could potentially clean up Gotham the same way Metropolis is cleaned up enough that Superman isn't needed for every mugging on the street. He's got enough time to have a day job at the, at the newspaper, but Gotham is just constantly a cesspool. And now we're watching all of this come to fruition. The thing I hate, because it makes Superman out to be a real jerk.
Well, I have so my understanding of this, the way that I kind of comprehend this, is that there's a mutual respect between the two superheroes, between Batman and Superman does not go into this territory that he does not oversee.
That's why I'm saying
a steward of criminal justice.
Yeah, but that's why I'm saying it's an unearned loyalty, right?
Absolutely.
Batman has not proven that he can do the job as well as if you put Superman up in the sky towering over Metropolis, and suddenly all of the muggers looked up and were like, this guy who can hear me from miles away around the world can hear me mugging an old lady, and he will get here in time to do whatever with his super breath or his heat vision or just knocking me through a wall or simply picking me up and throwing me into the air and then grabbing me and then taking me to prison. That is so much more terrifying than a person can't be everywhere at once. But
at one point, he will not be everywhere at once. It's such a temporary.
There is nothing that convinced
fix.
me that Superman could not clean up Metropolis in a week if given
I don't think he
the
could,
opportunity.
because once he's gone, once he's left to larger initiatives, things that are global interplanetary problems, this tiny little city will continue to erupt and be just as erosive
while the cat's
and
away.
just as destructive. So
Yeah.
I don't think. And I agree with you. I think certainly.
But what prevents Metropolis from doing the same thing? Like, Metropolis could easily turn into a cesspool every time Superman's got to go to Germany to take on an alien being that happened to land in Berlin or whatever. Like, nothing prevents crime from happening in Metropolis. But it's a clean enough city. It's a well-kept enough city that the city has not turned into this island of darkness same way that Gotham has.
Well, and I think that's the storytelling of Gotham City, that the corruption runs so deep that the heartbeat of Gotham City is not anything actually good. That inherently this city has such is shouldering such deep corruption that it will not take someone like Superman to just wipe that away.
But admit it.
No, I think he would just apples to apples, or apples to oranges rather. He would be much more effective in.
But there's the respect you're talking about is some conversation that has taken place, and we've even seen these conversations take place before. It's Batman saying, "Clark, stay out of Gotham. That's mine."
Yeah.
And Clark going like, "Okay." But what's Batman going to do if Superman decides to clean up Gotham City? Nothing. Like, he can't. Okay, he's got a kryptonite ring in his belt.
Yeah, he's got something in his back pocket.
Okay. All right. So what? I'm just saying Superman has some weird respect for Batman that seems to me to be unearned because he's not succeeded at anything. Even the same supervillains he keeps incarcerating keep getting out. So Superman needs to come in and clean the place up. If they live in the same universe, he can't. And
I do think that there's something about Batman's philosophy where he cares about righting the wrongs of this city, but he cares about doing it in a pattern that's much different than how Superman would do it.
Sure.
I truly believe that the philosophy of Batman is to have a better, and this is actually mostly based in the animated series that I'm kind of capturing this. I'm not taking into account many other depictions of Batman, which is to have a better understanding of why people end up in these corruptive places and end up feeling this sense of disillusionment and being compelled toward crime. That he wants to undo that on a much more gradual, much more involved way. He sort of wants to be in the mindset of these villains. He certainly, and even take Superman out of this, even Batman could be more effective in what he's doing with
100%.
his wealth, with his connections. He could certainly keep these people locked up for longer and more in more contained ways, but he doesn't choose to do that. But
in this particular depiction, I think it sort of nails my overall philosophy on Superman living in the same universe. Superman
I totally agree with
looks
that.
at Gotham City as cute. Like, he doesn't take Harley serious. Harley's got Superman's girlfriend tied up to a chair. Neither Lois nor Superman take Harley serious and or take her seriously. Mm-hmm. Instead, Superman's like, I'm busy. Here's this little boy who's going to take you on now. Lois, see you for sushi tonight. Like, he doesn't even help her get out of the chair. He just says, see you for sushi tonight.
It's non-threatening.
And then that night, while all of this is going down on live television, Superman and Lois are enjoying sushi at their local sushi restaurant. To him, Gotham City is cute.
I totally agree with you on this. It's minutia. It's small. There's a discompassionate Dr. Manhattan thing going on where I think Superman does not believe that this small community really matters in the big scheme of things.
Yeah.
How is this threatening to the larger well-being of this global society? And again, interplanetary, interdimensional framework that he uses. I don't think you're wrong in this, but it also reminds us that this is not his story. You know, There are these moments, and I'll be honest, I don't really like these moments. I don't want to see this like I don't like weaving in Superman into Batman stories very much for the reasons that you name, but also this is just not that kind of a story.
Right.
So it works well because it's continuing to show that Harley is dismissed. That I think there's some gender stuff going on here too, that because she's a woman that she seems non-threatening, like let's set up a kid to be her nemesis.
You think Superman is looking at her, or you think just simply the
just
writers
generally,
in general?
Yeah, I can't really speak to Superman, but just generally, again, in the zeitgeist of like the Gotham City villains, like I think that could certainly come into play with her being seen as kind of non-threatening, and she's not taken as seriously. And so, yes, just match her up with this minor who is not even yet fully actualized as a superhero. As you mentioned, he's a sidekick. Mm-hmm. And that's not what she's looking for. And so eventually Joker shows up to this battle between Harley and
sort of
Batman.
As a crybaby of like Tawny even puts the caption or the lower third on the screen. She took my man, similar to those sort of Jerry Springer-esque talk shows of the 90s, where Joker is more jealous that this woman came in and took his man, Batman. So that's why he jumps into the fray.
And he, you know, it's not really this episode. It really isn't about him. But again, Harley can't help but try to ultimately gain the attention of the Joker so that she can feel accomplished, invisible, and effective as a supervillain. You mentioned Ivy a little bit, and what comes up for me around just thinking about what this episode offers, because it's mostly a very battle-centered kind of like physical ending here where there's a lot of punches and kicks, and it's really about who's going to overcome the other side with the villains and Batman and Robin there. What we do see in terms of what's different with Poison Ivy is that she's now involved. And what comes up for me is an allyship construct where Ivy has always been a strong supporter of Harley, where she has mentored her and counseled her and comforted her whenever Harley is feeling a sense of failure, a sense that she isn't good enough, a sense that she's up against something, a structure that is bigger than herself. And last time we talked a little bit about how this structure is very male dominated. Mm-hmm. And I think Ivy has always been this supporting figure for her, or supportive figure for her. And here she really moves from allyship to becoming an accomplice.
Right.
And I really like that. I think that's something that it was building up. And now we see her like fully flared out with the giant, the limbs coming out, all the tendrils.
She's riding the sort of bulbous orchid into the room.
This entrance is huge. So she goes from being kind of behind the scenes with all of this intellectualizing about Harley's struggles to now being involved in it. Yeah. You know, you are in trouble and you've been in trouble this whole time, but now I'm going to be with you, next to you, right, helping you battle this trouble.
Right.
And so this is a conversation about allyship. And again, Ivy has always been an ally. I do want to say, because folks may want to know, what is the difference between being an ally and an accomplice? An ally is where somebody intentionally wants to take on the struggle as their own. They educate themselves. They understand, and this is kind of like one of the first steps as an ally. Understand your privilege. Understand your positionality. And this is not static. This is something that changes place to place, environment to environment. What are the benefits that you have, and how can you transfer those benefits to people less privileged than you? How do you amplify your voice? How do you do better to understand those who are vulnerable or more oppressed than you? Acknowledge that you feel pain too, but your pain might be different. You might have to decenter yourself and let others take space and let others tell their story. I think one of the most helpful things an ally can do is to give space for others to tell their story, because they have not, they're in the margins. They've not been in positions to tell their story and gain the visibility and the validation that more privileged people have. And I think that, a lot of the allyship work is around awareness, education, and decentering. So what does it mean to be an accomplice? How is accomplice work different? What I tell people when I talk about this in lectures is generally an ally is doing something for you, but an accomplice is doing something with you. So there's a willingness to get into a little bit of trouble yourself. Yeah. And the why behind that is that you might experience smaller consequences than someone who's getting into the same trouble, but is in a targeted position, again, maybe more vulnerable, maybe doesn't have as much privilege as you do. Sure. And this is a very contextualized situation, right? Because I think a lot of people right now, especially in the US, feel very compelled to step forward and be an accomplice and recognize that this kind of struggle comes with risks. And safety is a huge part of that. So if I'm an accomplice at work, am I doing something against the grain? Am I speaking up and vocalizing in a way that could get me into trouble? A very historically helpful comparison is when there were laws that people stepped up against. So things like segregation laws, for instance, what happens to be legal doesn't necessarily mean it's right.
Yeah.
And so accomplice work was some of the most effective work that could happen in those sit-ins, in those protests, in those, kind of banding together in those ways that communities who might at first seem different are actually working for the same thing. This collective liberation. And I just want to acknowledge, put simply, if you decide to be an accomplice, there are some things that you might lose, whether it's losing face, whether it's losing some community memberships that you might have, and then some more serious consequences, especially if you're working together to combat very real situations like policies and laws. And
you could lose your freedoms or even your life.
Yes. So I say this in a way, I'm bringing this back to Ivy, that up till now, and let me say that I think Ivy and Harley are coded in different ways. And I sort of saw them coded in different ways before this episode. But in this episode, I really did see Ivy as getting outside of her comfortable apartment. Remember this whole episode was about how like they were destroying her apartment. She has this like nice high-rise apartment, and her fancy coffee tables are being destroyed by this ragtag team of misfits, this crew coming together. You have King Shark and Clayface and Dr. Psycho and folks in her apartment that are destroying it. And the end of this, and she's complaining, of course, because she had this comfortable life, and then all these people who she's taken in and who she's helping, they're effectively disrupting her life.
Yeah.
At the end of the episode, she leans into it and decides, I'm not being as helpful just talking through this with the people that I care about in my high-rise apartment. I need to get out of the ivory tower, so to speak, and get into these spaces where my physical presence, my voice, and my resources might actually be more effective and more helpful. And she does that.
Until the end, when the landlord evicts her and she says, no, I'll kick them all out.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
I'll
getting
kick
back
them
to the
all out
apartment
right now.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, and there again are the real consequences of, what happens when you do get outside of your comfort zone. And in her case, that's kind of how the episode ends. There's this idea that they may have to find somewhere else to live.
Yeah, they may need another headquarters. So, Drea, did you like this episode?
I thought it was okay. I really want to see where all this is going. When they talk about Harley really growing, that's what I want to see. I want to see how that's going to happen.
I think we're going
to
to see that, if I remember correctly. I could be entirely wrong. It might be episode 7 or episode 8. But for some reason, I think episode 5 is where we get a little bit more of Harley's backstory. And that's the one that I am extremely interested in hearing your take on. That would be next time.
Before we wrap up, I do want to make a correction to something that I actually didn't say in the last episode. That sounds weird.
So you're not correcting anything. You're pointing out an omission.
I'm correcting something I said, but I didn't say a lot about a particular person.
Okay.
But I alluded to the person. So when we were talking about looks maxing, I made a suggestion that somebody who's...
This is the person you didn't want to say?
It's the person I didn't want to name, but actually he's not a looks maxer. It's Brian Johnson. Now I'm going to name him because I feel like I should just say who it is that I was referring to.
Okay.
Brian Johnson, who you may have read about or watched videos about, is this very wealthy tech entrepreneur who is not a looks maxer. He's more of a biohacker, where he's doing all these things to enhance his physical health. I mentioned the ice baths, but there are other things. Painstaking tracking and monitoring of his sleep, taking certain types of medicines and pills, tracking his heart rate, like doing from, T to B, just like a complete day-to-day, minute-to-minute
Okay.
working on how his intake of food, of medicine, of exercise, all those things impacts his longevity.
So why are we? So what? Why?
He's not well, I said he was. I sort of implied that he's a looks maxer because he spends all of his time interested in like maximizing how his body looks. But I hate to say it, it's a little deeper for him. It's really about living longer and having a younger. He does say he wants a younger, youthful look. Many say he does look younger than his age, but what he truly wants is to live as long as possible and then give his information to science so that everyone else can do the same thing. It's a little controversial, but I didn't name him, but I really don't want to associate him with looks maxing because that's a bit of a different thing that people are doing.
All right. So we're at least acknowledging our errors in that way. Nicely done. Until next time, Drea, why don't you tell the good folks where they can find you online?
You can find me on my website, drdreapsychology.com, on social media, Dr. Drea Psychology. We're getting some more voicemails. Please hang out on my website to find that information. You can also find the voice message link on the Arkham Sessions Instagram.
Yep. And you can find that Arkham Sessions Instagram at the Arkham Sessions. You can find me on Instagram. I am at B_Ward028. I'm going to tell you right now, we have officially gotten rid of our Twitter account. We are no longer associated with that platform, so don't come looking for us there. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us. Our email is arkhamsessions@gmail.com. Follow our family over at Fanbase Press. They would love to have you. Check out their other podcasts, their comic books, their news. Lots of good stuff over there. Until next time, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
the Arkham Sessions.
Yeah, I'm a little sweet potato pie.